Hi guys, welcome back to the On the Court webinar series. Today we're going to introduce Joe Payne, goalkeeper currently at Bolton Futsal Club. A lot of history in the game now, played for Loughborough as well, and Uni of Nottingham for a while. Current in England international as well. What he's going to talk about is transitioning from being a football goalkeeper into futsal, some of the techniques around that, and the pros and cons that he sees from both sides. Really interesting chat from what I've seen so far. I'll let him take it from there. If you've got any questions related to any of the slides, pop them in. If it's a generic question, please try and keep it towards the end, and we'll have a big Q&A at the end. I'll pass over to Joe.
Real, thanks, Juan. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it, and I hope that this can be as beneficial as it will be listening as it was making it. So before I kick off, like Juan said, if you've got any questions around the slide, feel free to put it in the chat or put your mic on and ask the question. I'm happy to answer relevant questions about each and every slide. But if you've got a futsal goalkeeping question, I'm taking questions at the end for as long as, well, until they're all done, I suppose. Real. So give you a little bit of background about myself. So I started playing football when I was about 8 years old, and growing up, I played a lot of football in the back garden with my granddad, and that's where I realised that I had quite a good knack for being in goal, and it's where I quite enjoyed playing. As you can see me there, a young lad, not too happy about being in goal at that point though. Although that seemed to change over time, due to reasons I'll get into in the forthcoming slides, I ended up coming out of goal at a certain point, going to play football outfield, developing my footwork, and then looking a career through boxing throughout, and then picking up the gloves again around the age of 17, 16, where I started to play in goal at 11-a-side. Whilst doing this, that's when I was introduced into futsal. For those of you that have an eagle eye, I'm sure you can spot the badge that's on my shirt there. It's Kettering Futsal. So I come from Kettering. It's my local town. And I'm fortunate enough to have my PE teacher was also the head coach of the futsal club. So he kind of introduced me into the idea of playing in goal, as he knew that I was pretty handy inside the sticks, and he felt like this would be a good solution to my short height. And from there, really, I was an academic lad, and I looked to go to university, and that's where I was approached by Matt Forrest at the time to go to Loughborough and look to do academic studies there whilst also playing futsal on the IFA. So that's really where I spend most of my time in my career so far. I spent 3 consistent years there learning the trade. Obviously, once again, those that can see the pictures, a few faces that have been around the block a few times. The majority of lads there have been involved with the England system some way or another. My club partner at the time there, Crofty, is also my international partner at the moment. After spending 3 years there, I kind of thought I need to push on and start getting some real hard playing time to learn my trade. So I took a step up, I stepped down to go to the University of Nottingham, the league below. It's where I feel like I got to implement everything I learned in the space of a consistent season. And that was before leaving my masters and leaving Nottingham to move up north to Bolton and to Manchester, where I'm currently living in Manchester, playing for Bolton, and also part of the England setup in the senior side. So that's just a little bit about myself. So moving on to the topic around the slides, I'm going to cover the stages that I interacted with around in football, whilst just playing football solely. Then football and futsal was kind of twin tracking the two, and then futsal solely, and how I found the experiences then. So in my early stages of football, like I said, I had to take a break really from being in goal, and that wasn't a choice that was really made around myself. I love playing in goal, and I always have loved playing in goal, but as it is now, I stand at 5'10", and when I was younger, I was definitely one of the smallest in my year. So before really even given an opportunity, I was pushed out of being a goalkeeper, and given the chance to develop my technique and see how far I could push. So well, the first thing I'd like to talk about is like stereotypical assumptions made around physical attributes, and I think this works both ways. I'm sure there are plenty of people in the futsal community that have been told that are goalkeepers that have been told that they are too small to be an 11-a-side goalkeeper, and it can be quite diminishing as a child to be told you can't do something that you want to do. Eventually, you get over it, like anything in life, but it definitely set me back for a little while. Um, this can work both ways, which I found quite interesting, because if you've got stereotypically you're the tall lad or you're the bigger lad, um, the manager will kind of like push you towards being a goalkeeper. But if you could be, we see it in nowadays. There's so many footballers in the world that are 6'2", 6'3", that have got fantastic technical ability with their feet, but they could lose the same amount of time going forward in their chosen path of being an outfield player, not a goalkeeper, because they're being pushed into a certain corner at a young age. And I think this kind of is involved with my second point, which is just a general lack of knowledge around goalkeeping at an entry level. I don't think anyone's to blame for that, and I don't think anyone does it on purpose. There are obviously the FA does have courses in place to allow for coaches at all levels to grow their knowledge, but there's one goalkeeper in a squad of 16 in football. Really, it's very rare that you have a second goalkeeper when you're growing up. You've probably just got the one, so you make up about 7% of the team. So the odds of your coach or your manager having an experience of being a goalkeeper, which is so different from an outfielder. There's very little transferable appliances technically from being a keeper to an outfielder. That you might get left alone a bit. And you kind of everything's left broad. So one thing I kind of noticed when I was growing up and I was an outfield player, once I come out of goal, the goalkeeper only got coached on to stop the ball going in the goal, in the sense of you had a good game if you didn't concede many. But I think that's completely subjective, and I don't think that's right. I think you can have a great game and concede goals if you're looking to work on certain things. And without that knowledge, without that understanding, it can be quite easy to not develop as a goalkeeper in football if you don't have that opportunity. And when I was playing outfield, I also had the privilege of playing in a couple of academies. And one of those was Aston Villa, and one of them was Birmingham. And both of them, like, there was no goalkeeper coaching. There was nobody coaching the goalkeeper on what they should be doing. And I know their kids more. I know we're working on fundamentals, but even as a kid, you get taught when to slide tackle, when to stand tackle. There was none of that for a goalkeeper. It was more just keep the ball out the net. So I found it being essentially a self-taught position as a child, like when to try and catch the ball, when to try and push it away, when to like play it close to you, when to play it long. It all came from your own reinforcement, really, and that was kind of my experience growing up in a solely football stage. As being a goalkeeper, found that I was kind of left to my own means to discover new ways of success. And obviously, at a young age, that can be quite difficult, and it can be quite demotivating if you're having a bad run and you don't really know what's going on. But then, at the age of 16, 17, I started ignoring, really. I wasn't in the academy setup anymore. I wasn't wanting to be a professional footballer. It's something that I'd understood that it was never going to happen for myself. So I decided to go back doing what I enjoyed most, and that was going in goal. And I found that I progressed a considerable amount in my enjoyment level in football, just from doing something I enjoyed. And at the same time, I was also starting to play futsal at a competitive level. So the photos you can see is the one on the left is me at 18, winning the League Cup with Kettering. And then the one on the right is winning the Bucks Trophy at Loughborough at 20. So there's only 2 years between these photos, but there's a long journey between them. And the one thing I learned was there's a significant amount of transferable skills and principles across the two. However, I do think there's more so for futsal going into football rather than there be a lot of transferable skills going from football into futsal. So just to expand on that a little bit, when I picked up the gloves again, I'd been playing futsal a little bit, and I was at an age where I was getting taught more technical things. So instead of being taught to stop the ball going in the goal and having a good game, it was more so, what would you do in this scenario? Would you trust your player to receive the ball there? Would you want to just clear your lines here? What's your choice of save? And they're the questions get asked in futsal a lot. I feel like if you speak to anyone about futsal goalkeeping, we've heard of the generic terms of like a split save, a K save, knee sliding, a low diving save. Where in football, these terms aren't really, they're not really a thing. You kind of just got 1v1 and shot stopping. So allowing myself to play futsal gave me a positive in my football, because I was able to take these skills, these blocking saves, these split saves, and put them into my football game, which excelled it. However, and I'm not saying this is the case for everybody, I did find that on the flip side of it, taking what I was doing in football was prohibiting my futsal. And I'm not saying it slowed down my development, because I do still feel as if a player can twin track and play futsal and get better at and football and get better at both. What I found was, for myself personally, playing football created habits that didn't work so well in futsal, whereas futsal created habits that did work well in football. Um, I mean, it's a question that if there's any coaches in this webinar right now that have got lads or girls that are playing both futsal and football, to ask them and to see if they feel the same, if they feel like their futsal is making them better at football, but maybe their football is making them slightly develop slower at futsal. So the scenario I'll use there is decision making and your engagement into the game. And I'll come on to that more on the next slide, because it's something in futsal which is massive. But I'll touch on it now. When in futsal, you have to be physically and mentally prepared at all times in the game, no matter where the ball is. Where in football, as a goalkeeper, I feel like there's a nasty habit of certain goalkeepers, maybe not so the top level, but definitely at your beginning levels and your like local league levels, where the goalkeeper isn't that switched on. And if you take that and you take your mental state in the football game and take it into the futsal, that could cost you goals. It could cost you goals. It could cost you scenarios that could leave men having to take yellow cards, red cards. So that is an example I like to use, where your football isn't necessarily helping your futsal, but on a technical side of things, your futsal definitely improve your football. If anyone's got any like questions on that, that's something that I feel quite strong, not necessarily strongly about, and it's do or die, but something that I had and I couldn't help but notice. So if anyone's had that experience or knows of anyone, that'd be interesting to hear. So taking that, obviously, that's where I decided I wanted to put my time into futsal mainly, and because I came to the conclusion that if I keep going with football and futsal, I'm going to slow my development. So I decided to stop football at 2021, and I was just started to play in the Evo Premier League, which is one below the Conference North. So it's not a bad division, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. So the main things I found with futsal is understanding and accepting that it is a different game. Obviously, we know it's a different game, but what I mean by this is, when you take the two games and you look at the amount of times you're involved with the ball, you're involved with shots, with your players, the responsibility you have over your players in moments, it's vastly higher compared to football. And if you don't understand that, you can take your football mentality of conceding a goal is really bad and we won't get one back, and it can get you down mentally. So understanding it's a different game for me at the start was really important. I set a goal when I started playing, and that was to concede as little goals as I can, like any goalkeeper would. And in my head, I had figures like one or two. But in the team I was playing in, and where I was at in my career, I think that it wasn't realistic, and I think I had to understand that futsal is a game of goals, it's a game of fast pace, and as a goalkeeper, you need to understand that you will concede goals, and that's okay, as long as you know why you've conceded them and what you can do and what decisions you can put in place to improve. Once you've got that, it's then about progressing. Really, like you understand the game, you understand your role, and then so you move on to the last point made, which was what can you do to put things in place to make it better. So the biggest thing for me, and this is hands down the biggest thing for me about my game is the fact that you're involved with every moment in the game, like every moment, whether it's your team's corner, whether it's you got the ball in your hand, whether the ball's out of play and gone for the opposition's goal throw, you are involved in that moment because. And I once again, I've tried to do this presentation in a way that it follows on nicely. So I'll touch on to why that's so important in a moment. But quickly around it is, if you're not aware of the game, you can get from one end of the court to the other in 2 seconds. 2 seconds, the ball can travel and you can concede. It is the most like, mentally challenging thing I've done in terms of sport, having to be that mentally prepared for that long for 90 minutes roughly, 40-minute stop clock. And it's so important that you get that and you can't switch off for a second, because as soon as you do, you find that you will concede a goal and you know it's because of that. And that's where the responsibility heightens, because you as a goalkeeper then you have to take that on your shoulders and understand that you're the last line of defence. And so if someone else switches off in front of you, not only have you got to try and correct what they're doing and get them back to where they were, you might have to make up for their mistakes. So if you and that player aren't mentally in the game, then the team that you're playing against are going to run rings around you. We all see it. Like some games, there could be a good team, a great futsal team that goes 5-0 down, and you stand there and you go, why? And all it could be is one player on that team doesn't have the mental capacity of that game. And don't get me wrong, there's loads of variables involved for that. It could be so many different things. But for me, that is the main one. When someone's not there mentally, you see it and it's picked on in futsal. And for a goalkeeper, if you're not there mentally, it means goals. It means you'll be conceding many goals. So around the futsal goalkeeper, I don't really want to indulge into the presentation too much around like K saving, block saving, split saving, etc. Because I think there's a lot of resource out there, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end around it. I'm more than happy to do so. But the link I've put in the presentation, you've probably seen it recently around social media, but it's the first stage of the FA's boot room guidelines around a futsal goalkeeper. And there's 4 stages. It kind of gives you a look round, like I said, the block save, the K save, the split save, throw in. It kind of covers a nice generic of a futsal goalkeeper. So if you are looking to see some drills, to understand a little bit more about what it is that involve like the technique side of a futsal goalkeeper, then I'd definitely indulge into the link I've put on the FA's website. So going back to the point I made around you have to be mentally prepared. The reason that I say this is because something that always stuck with me in my career is defend the half, defend the D, and defend the goal. And what I mean by this is you're not just defending the goal. You're a goalkeeper, yes, but your job is essentially to mark that half. That is your half, and you're responsible for it. And this was something that was presented to me by Tony Elliott in probably my first year inside the England setup, around 4 years ago now. And it has more than one purpose in the sense of if you're defending your goal, well done, you're defending the goal, that's not a problem. But if you were to defend the D, would that help you? Or if you were to defend the half even, would that help you? So I'm going to throw a scenario in here now. And imagine you are a futsal goalkeeper and you're standing somewhere between point B and C. So you're on your goal, you're not quite on your goal line, but you're not quite on the edge of your box. The opposition goalkeeper picks up the ball ready to go. And the opposition pivot is standing on the 10-metre line without anyone marking him. The ball goes straight into him and he's 1v1 because they've caught you on the counter. So take that scenario, you've now got a 1v1 facing up with a pivot with no help. If your position was marking the half and defending the half, if you were on the front foot looking like you wanted to win the ball when it comes over, probably somewhere between the 10-meter point and B and the edge of the D, the keeper's going to see you. And I know as a goalkeeper, I've done it. I'm sure that there's goalkeepers in this chat that have gone to look to play long or play to a player and seeing the goalkeeper's reading you and he knows you're going to do it and you have to change what you're going to do in that moment. You might not necessarily have to win the ball. Your objective is, can you stop it from getting into your half? And by defending the half and by approaching that player, you force the goalkeeper to make another decision. You might have to play short, and suddenly, ball is inside their own 10 meters, potentially with pressure, and they've got to play out of that rather than playing over the top to give them a 1v1 situation. So that's a nice scenario I like to talk about around defending the half. Defending the D, it's a similar principle in the sense of if you've got somebody 1v1 on the wing and they want to come inside and they want to shoot, obviously. So what can you do? What can you do in that moment to stop them, to try to prevent them from coming forward? To go, oh, do you know what? If I take him 1v1, the keeper's just going to clean me out. If your positioning is around the edge of the D and you're on the front foot again and someone's 1v1, then they're probably not going to back themselves to go down the line to go 1v1 because you're there. You're going to clean them up. You see many top goalkeepers doing it. Juanjo for Barcelona, he's constantly winning the 1v1s. He's the cover inside the 10 meter. And by doing it, what you essentially do is you tell everyone else on the court to go, if you're going to do that, that's fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up and you're not going to have a shot on goal. Whereas if you stood on your goal line and somebody got beat 1v1, you offer them the shot. So essentially what I'm talking about here is what can you do before that ball gets to your goal? What can you do before that ball gets to the edge of your D? And what can you do before that ball gets into your half? Because if it's not in the half, I'm not going to say it's not a threat. The ball's always a threat, but it's less of a threat. Especially if it gets in your half, that's fine. But can you stop it getting into your D? And if they get in your D, that's when you're on your last line, you're on your goal line, and the probability says you're probably not in your favour to save the ball. But you need to try. That's why you need to try and do everything you can to stop them getting to point C. I hope that makes sense. If not, like I said, I'm happy to. If you put in the chat now, I'm happy to answer anything around it. But if not, I'll hold it to the end if you want. Okay, bro. I'll move on. So another point I'd like to carry through is techniques and tactics are great, and they are there to help us, but they don't control us. And this is more so something I feel as a goalkeeper. I feel there's a lot of technique going into goalkeepers. Like I've mentioned a few already with a knee slide, a K save, a split save. You've got different kinds of throwing. You've got a lofted throw, an underarm, like a javelin throw, a direct one with pace. There's all kinds of different techniques and tactics that are used, such as press breakers. If you don't know what a press breaker is, it's basically a set tactic or routine that a goalkeeper can call for the players to do to try break a press. And and they're all great and they all have the benefits. But I do come across a lot of goalkeepers that think that technique is more important and tactic is more important than the overall objective. And the overall objective is to play what you see, because the ball could travel across your goal and you could go, okay, I'm going to make a split here. And you do a split, but the guy takes it around you. And you can, I know goalkeepers after that kind of go, okay, well, my split was good, so why didn't it work? And essentially the question just could be, you chose the wrong technique, or was there even need to choose a technique in that moment? Could you have delayed the situation? And goals can go in where you go, oh, but my technique was good, so why did it go in? I think there's a big fascination around futsal goalkeeping and technique and tactics where sometimes you need to step away from it and look at the picture and go, hold on a minute, I'm not in a game to make sure my technique is right. I'm in a game to stop the ball from going in the back of the net and to choose which technique is the best for doing that. Not necessarily your best technique, not the one you can do the best, but the one that is perfect for that moment. And don't get me wrong, there will be times and there'll be points in your career. I had a stage probably in my third year at Loughborough, so I would have been 21, and I just started playing in the Super League, and this is my first year in really diving in to getting a chance to use all these techniques and tactics that I've been training on, some real hard game time, and you do leak goals because you don't know what situation is best yet, and that's fine. That is a time in your career, and that is a time in the moment where you can try and figure out what techniques are best and what tactics are best to use, what press breaker is great for this. But there is a point as well where you need to look at yourself and look at what you're doing and go, okay, I'm getting too focused now around my technique and making sure it's good. What I'm actually forgetting about is keeping the ball out the back of the net. And I know players, outfielders that feel this across all levels of the game, and I think it's one of those things that a goalkeeper would be not afraid, not necessarily afraid to admit, because essentially some people may take it as the technique or the tactic is failing. I don't think that's the case. Like something you pick, like you could make the best decision out there. You can have made the best decision, the ball might still go in. But the whole point is they don't control us. Maybe in that moment, the best thing you can do is just fling your body at the ball, and that is something I can't stress enough. Which is why I put it as my third point. Don't forget the ultimate aim of the goalkeeper, and that is to stop the ball going in the back of the net. I like there's not enough stress around this. I've had conversations with teammates around that have conceded a goal and then they've gone back into the K save shape or the split shape they made and trying to figure out why it went in. And the reason why it went in probably is because you're thinking of too much around the technique and not worried about keeping the ball out the back of the net. I'm pretty sure your teammates, your manager, and yourself would be happier knowing the ball's gone out for a kick in or for a corner and having slightly off technique rather than having the perfect technique but the ball going off and going in and maybe flicking off your shin and going in. And there's a really fine line between the last couple of things I've said here between getting technique perfect and using the right one at the right time, and when's best just to go, I'm gonna stop the ball going in the goal, and you can't forget it because it really is the goalkeeper's job to save the ball. Yeah, I think this is something that is it's a bit of a messy topic in the sense of it's not a very pretty one to talk about, but I know we have an inside joke with the pro futsal goalkeeper Johnny Simaround. He loves a face save. He loves to save the ball with his face, and it's not the prettiest of ways to save the ball, and it's probably not the best technique to save the ball. Does the ball go in the back of the goal? Is everyone happy it's not in there? Yes. So that makes it the best decision. That's the end of everything I've kind of talked about. If there's anything in there that you'd like me to go back to and cover over, I'd be more than happy to do so. Or if you've got any like burning questions around futsal goalkeeping in general, any drills or questions you've had raised to you in the past, feel free to jump in.
That's class, Joe. Really, really good. So we'll open up the floor now to any questions that any guys might have. I'm sure you do. One of the questions I do have to kick us off was more around what you mentioned towards the middle of the slide, which is the mental state, and it's something that we've been having discussions about as coaches over the last couple of days, really around player behaviours and sort of playing in goal myself. That transition from a larger sided sport, which is football, into then futsal, as you mentioned, where you're much more involved. And in training sessions, for example, when you concede the amount of goals that you probably concede in training sessions through shot drills is much higher to that of if you were to do it in football. When you then transfer back to football, how did you find that affected your mental capacity? And were you more likely to bounce back from a mistake then, having been exposed to numerous mistakes or a lot more mistakes on a consistent basis, say, for example, in training at futsal?
Okay, So, well, first of all, I think I think the best way to answer the question is yes, it did help going back to football. Um, you suddenly the mental capacity of being in a futsal game became my sport game, and that was what I took into anything I did after that. So I'd go into the football game and I'd kind of up my mental ability, and I kind of tried to bring as much of the futsal things I'd learned, whether it be technical attack, into my game. So even when I talked about defending the half, I think it's difficult. First of all, you can't if you're not mentally prepared, you can't defend the half in football. There's too much ground to cover, and it's impossible for you to react in the moment to beat a striker that already knows he's going somewhere. I don't think you can do it unless you are Usain Bolt or you are a fantastic goalkeeper, top notch. But for the majority of us, I don't believe that's possible. So keeping a mental state allowed me to try and defend the half, to be on the edge of my box and kept looking for a ball. Looking if you're not necessarily trying to stop the ball coming because the space is too big, but you put yourself in a mental state that if the ball does come, you're prepared for what's going to happen next. So I think that was a big point that I did find transferred into football from futsal, and taking that, but like kind of like a line deeper onto the edge of the box. Mental ability. I wasn't just looking at who was on the ball. I was aware of how many defenders we had in the box. I was aware of the foot that the player was. If he was right foot to play, but it was on his left, that also enabled me to display like instructions to my defenders, like push him line. I want him to go line because he's left footed and he's currently coming inside on his left foot. I want him to go on his weaker foot. And in when the defenders in contact and in the game so much, they probably won't realise that. So if you can help them and try guide them in that sense, then you're going to do a good job. That's kind of like where I took the mental side of things, from going from futsal to football.
Yeah, I'd say what do you see as the biggest psychological difference between the two sports?
I think the fact that the 11-a-side game almost takes the game away from you for a lot. So if you're in a team, if you're currently in a game where the ball is you're having a lot of the ball and your team's doing well when they're in the attacking half, I think that is the biggest psychological challenge, trying to stay switched on in a football game, because the ball is so far away from you. It's got to go through two lines before it even gets to your half. It's so hard to stay kind of like positive in that moment and try to stay switched on. And on the flip side of that, in futsal, you can't. You have to stay mentally prepared constantly. Because if it's a corner, you may need to be an option. If you have your own corner, you need to be an option if all else fails. If their goalkeeper has the ball, like I said, you might have to defend the half and stop the ball going forward. You may find your team with a bad touch get pressed, and then within a second, you may have to have the ball at your own feet, and you're having to make a decision going forward. So I think the biggest mental state between the two is just like trying to transfer the mental ability into both. I think that is the hardest thing.
Class. So Joe's put out a question here about, you spoke about being a young football goalkeeper. You were typically self-taught. Do you feel this is where futsal is now? There are a lot of goalkeeper schools for football, but hardly any, if any, for futsal. Would you recommend for a futsal coach to give more to the goalkeeper in a team session?
Um, I don't think you're wrong. I think that there is a lot of futsal goalkeeping at the moment which is self-taught. In the sense of you're in the session yourself, you're trying to learn and understand what works, what kind of save works, what kind of like language you use. Like you hear some people say change, some people say switch, some people say follow. You're trying to find what works for you, and that is going to be self-taught. I think that the best thing I've had then, take away actual futsal goalkeeper coaches, because it's quite rare in this country, like you've stated, to have a goalkeeper coach as such. And compared to football now, there are a lot of goalkeeper footballing skills and training sessions. The best thing I can recommend would be you have a session that involves the players and the outfielders as well as yourself. But there's not just so for the attackers and the outfielders, it maybe just be a shooting drill. But for you, it may be a shooting drill that forces you to work on a back post save. It may be a shooting drill that works on a 1v1. And unfortunately, there isn't goalkeeping resources out there in person that much. There's lots online, but to get a goalkeeper coach down is difficult in futsal. So the best thing you can kind of do is try and ask your manager to do a training session or training drill around something that will enable you to work on a skill. So if you want to work on your throwing, if you want to work on your blocking, if you want to work on your split saving, pick one. If it's split saving, like I said, find a drill. They may practice their 1v1s and have to play back post. And then you're working on your, okay, I know there's a guy at the back post. I'm going to wait when the pass goes. I'm going to go back post, and you practice that split save. And once, like I said earlier, you're kind of going through trial and error, because sometimes you'll get it, sometimes you won't. Sometimes it might go above you, underneath you. You might tweak things slightly. But as where futsal is at the moment, especially in this country, I would say you are being self-taught on more cases than not. And if that's the case, just don't allow for yourself to fall into habits and think that you're an okay goalkeeper. Constantly, every session, pick something to work on. And then once you've picked that something, pick it again. What is it about that something you're trying to work on that needs to improve?
Class. So Ian's asked if is there any other resources for futsal keeper training drills?
I think the best thing, the internet's your best friend, really, and the community as well. I think the person you know might not have the answers, but they might know somebody. Um, I know that personally. There's FLT programs that have already been talked about on the webinars, and there's like structural places for kids, for young adults. There's teams that are going around, but at the same time, I know for a fact to myself, I've only been approached by maybe two or three like futsal clubs, whether they be youth, whether they be a fully fledged National League side. And I think you'll find that the community is more than wanting to help everybody. I think they want to help everyone. And so don't be afraid to ask somebody. Don't be afraid to message the likes of myself, someone on the court. There is no shame, and I'm sure we'll all be wanting to help you. But besides that, the internet is your best friend. I think there's so much resource on there, and some of it might not be for you, but there's definitely some things I've seen that I've wanted to try in my own time that have been definitely useful.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the NFS, we're lucky that the NFS is so approachable, and I think that the sport that we're in, even in Spain, the professional clubs, they're very approachable, and you'll be able to talk to one of the top players in the country, and in just a few messages, either on LinkedIn or Twitter. So yeah, I think Joe's right in saying that anybody is a stone's throw away, and really try and make the use of that, and contact people like Joe, because I'm sure he'll be happy to help in terms of sessions. So Andrew's asked, how do you mentally prepare yourself for a big game?
Um, it's a bit of a funny one, really, because I didn't really mention it, but I spent a lot of my time whilst playing football outfield, pursuing a boxing career where I had 33 fights, and I boxed on an international level, and I boxed lads that went on to the Olympics. So I boxed to a good level, and I think for me personally, knowing you're going to go into a boxing ring with somebody for 15 minutes and have a fight with them in front of around 400 people is so much more daunting. And you're the only one in that ring. Nothing can help you in there once you're in. It's so daunting, so scary that now, knowing I've got teammates with me, my manager, coaches that can support me and help me, the biggest thing I do mentally to prepare for a big game is just relax. It's purely just to relax and know that, understand the importance of the game and understand your job in that game, but not to overthink things, not to rush into, okay, in this game I'm going to definitely do this. I don't want to concede 2 goals. Because in big games, and this I'm talking about big games here, things can go crazy. You can be a couple goals down within a minute because it's a big game and you was that up for it. You might crash. So for me, the best thing I've found playing futsal is just to relax, take in everything that's going on, and just take the game minute by minute. Ease yourself into it, and do what's right for you. There's no certain way. There's no definition of how to prepare mentally for a game. It's what suits you. I enjoy having a laugh. An hour before kickoff, I'll be having a laugh with my teammates, and then I slowly wind down and relax a little bit more into the game. And then when we get on court for the warm up, we start demanding what we need off each other, what we expect in the game. That will change for everybody, but for me, that's what works.
Class. So the next one from Sam is, how do you keep your technique and flexibility on point during this lockdown period? I'm sure it means fitness levels as well, but mainly the flexibility and technique.
Okay, well, for me, with the flexibility and technique, it's kind of came from years of muscle memory. So I'm used to training a couple of times a week, and I stretch in my own time anyway, probably 3 times a week for half an hour. I'll go downstairs. I've got a carpet in front of the TV. I'll put a Netflix episode on. And I'll have a good stretching session, and I'll try and make it transferable. So I wouldn't necessarily sit there in a stretching position, standing up with my arm above my head, pushing down on my elbow, but because it's not really transferable. I'll try and be in a position where I'm stretching in a futsal benefiting position. So imagine you're sitting in a split stretch and you're stretching your hamstring. You can lean over and bring your top arm over to stretch your back. And not only are you increasing your flexibility, or you're trying to keep it or increase your flexibility and your movement, you're also doing it in a position where you might find yourself in the game. So I think trying to make that as close to a game or training scenario as you can is really important. And around keeping fit, I'm jogging 3 to 4 times a day, eating healthier than I have been over the last probably 12 months, if I'm honest with you, just because the time in the day to be able to cook great meals. I'm sure we're all probably sitting in a position like that. I'd make the most of this time to eat well and use the hour of exercise a day. And like I said, when it comes to flexibility, try to do it in a futsal position, something that's going to be transferable, and maintain it.
Yeah, great advice there, Joe. So Jim's put, enjoyed listening to your language, including ignoring coaches when younger. What do you need from a coach who, on balance, is mostly focused on outfield play?
um, uh, I'd say for all, as a young goalkeeper, the one thing I wanted was a chance to show that. Like, so something I talked about was the stereotyping that you kind of pushed out. I was pushed out of goal before I really got the chance to develop my techniques, and I don't think that's so much now. I know a lot of smaller goalkeepers that kind of keep that clubs keep with growing up because they are good technically. Um, but what I would have, if I was back where I was, what I'd have asked from my manager was to give me opportunity, 100%. That's all I would have ever asked for. And that's all I asked for now as a player, opportunity. Not promises, not minutes. I asked for opportunity to like earn them and to be there. And then besides that, I'd also ask for kind of like direction. So you may concede a goal because you've tried to catch the ball. Or you might be diving low and gone to catch the ball and you haven't been able to hold it on impact and you've released it and it's gone to the striker in front of you. The direction isn't, like bloody hell, catch it next time. Like for me, the direction should be okay. But if you can't catch the ball in that situation, what's the next best thing? Okay, it's to put it into a safer area, which is away, whether it be like similar to what I said earlier in foot soccer, whether it be a corner, whether it be a throw in. That's the kind of transferable information that I'd be wanting from my manager. And I understand that. Like I kind of said, a goalkeeper makes up like 7%, if that, of a football team, of a football squad even. So there's not going to be many people that have much of an insight into what it's like to be a goalkeeper and what you want. And a lot of time is directed to outfield players. But just structural advice and direction around what you'd want me to do when a situation happens is great. Any child, because I know when I was younger and things I'd get lobbed, and it's the bane of any short goalkeeper's career, getting lobbed. And what I did to try to prevent that was at the time as my PE teacher came, and I would have been about 11, and I was playing for the school, and he came to me and said, "Look, if this is an issue, then think about your starting position. So if you're getting caught on kind of in between the 6 yard box and the edge of the box, and you're getting lobbed, can you start higher to come into contact with them, a bit like I said earlier about defending the D, or can you wait for them so that the lob isn't on because the space is too small and you come out 1v1 and you try to get into a more of a lower battle with them. And obviously that's coming from a guy who does teaching and coaching for a living. So it might not be as developed as that, but some kind of directional advice and something a child or a goalkeeper, whatever age they are, if I'm honest, can take away and probably think about and try in the next session is definitely worthwhile.
Yeah. So Sam's asked, what skills would you make a priority to coach when you only have 30 minutes?
I would say your basics are what will. If you don't master, it's like anything. If you don't master your basics, you'll never really achieve the top levels. You got to have strong foundations to build a house. All the terminology you want to use, it's all applicable. Work on your blocking, work on your splitting, work on your ability to throw the ball, your technique, and then after that, your time. That's what you need to do in your individual sessions, in my opinion. You need to work on these technical things that you can really drive into. So if you were looking at blocking, Sam, and you're going into a K shape, I'll ask you, if I was to ask you a question now, have you ever thought about what position your toes in when you go into a blocking? And I don't know what the answer is. If the answer is no, then why not think about it? Because if your toe is upright, it's then acting as a barrier rather than a ramp. And a barrier means that the ball hits your foot, it'll go away. But if you're not in the balls of your feet, if you're not on your toes, if you're on the insole, it'll roll over. And these are tiny, tiny things. But in these 30 minutes, when you start to develop further, that's what you need to start hitting into. So work on your blocking, get the general block. Okay, what will make your block better? Work on what will make it better. Try new things, try different things, figure out what works for you. And then in the whole session with the outfielders, it's when you can start trying it in a game-like scenario. Because it's like anything. If you can do it in isolation, that's great. But it might not necessarily work in the game. But 100% drive into these core skills. Your blocking, your splitting, your throwing, and then talk as well. Just talk to your goalkeeper. What does your fellow goalkeeper think you should do in that situation? What works for them? What works for you? What doesn't work? That's the time you've got to figure things out. And then when you go into the whole session, then drill into what's going to work in a game and what isn't, because that's the reality.
So Chris Bright, who's a pretty decent outfield player as well, has asked, do you think your experience as an outfield player when you were younger helped with your transitions to futsal, where goalkeepers are far more involved in the game with your feet and the general gameplay?
Yeah, completely. I think in a way I was fortunate to have that time with my feet. I mean, I know there's many people that know I back myself with my feet. There's many people that don't agree with me. But I'm comfortable with the ball at my foot, and I think it's about making sure your players are comfortable too, because if you're in a situation where you're getting pressed as a team, and your outfield defender, your backman needs to give the ball to you at feet in front of the goal, they need to be able to trust in you to keep that ball, or at least not have that ball end up in the goal. I think playing outfield as a kid, like I played centre midfield when I went out onto pitch, played CDM. I picked up a lot of the ball. I had it a lot on my feet, and one of the main things I prided myself on as a footballer was kind of my composure, to try and just keep the ball, try to find a pass in every situation, not just to give possession back over. And I think that over time, that's helped my essential gameplay, because I've had scenarios and I've got footage where I've received the ball off my defender and I've played the ball over the top and we've scored and we've created a chance, we've kept possession, we've ended up going to score a minute later. And I think if you haven't got that experience, it's not the all or end all. You can go get that experience. Who's to say you can't go into your futsal session and go, coach, can I warm up as an outfielder today? And because I want to work on my feet. There's no harm in doing that. It's something that, I mean, like I said, I'm always trying to find new ways to improve myself. And this season, I was going to our development team sessions to solely play outfield with my feet to understand what it's like as a player under pressure and to get better at my footwork. So if it's needed to be called upon in the game, it's there at their expense.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting, that, Joe. Something I hadn't really thought about before, but I say as a coach, I'd probably encourage my goalkeepers now to try and do that as well. So no, that's a great point. Um, so Alec from the US says he has the goal of playing at the highest level of futsal in England, and that you played for Uni of Notts and Loughborough. But how were your experiences of both? Because he's got the goal of coming to play here in the future.
Um, I had completely different experiences at both. Um, I found Loughborough was very driven futsal, which obviously has its benefits. I think it's where a lot of my fundamentals were made and a lot of my groundwork goalkeeping in futsal was formed. And I had the luxury of having Matt Croft, who's my colleague at England, as a teammate as well. So you had Dylan Malpass, who's an England blind goalkeeper, also at Loughborough. Tom Dennis, who was a previous England futsal goalkeeper. So you get the gist of things. I was in a place where futsal goalkeeping was probably at its height in the country at club in terms of what came through the door, and I think obviously that creates organic growth in a player. So my time at Loughborough helped me with that. However, I think that my time at University of Nottingham was where I really found myself as a goalkeeper. I'd really encourage you to look at going there. I think it's a good. I think they're both fantastic universities, and they've both got a great kind of futsal program with a great plan. I think the best thing to do is just look what you're wanting to do, and whether it be academically, whether it be sporting based, make a decision off that. But I think if you're looking to go to either or, you won't go far wrong. They've both got great traits about them, and they're both good places to live. Although I would advise, I mean, I lived in the city centre of Nottingham, and there's a little bit more going on. So if you're used to a little bit of a town or city life, then I'd recommend going to Nottingham.
That's great. Completely. So do you think playing at the highest level of futsal would it be advantageous to carry on playing football, or do you think it would be harm your progress in futsal if futsal is your number one choice? I think that's the battle for a lot of outfield players and goalkeepers as well.
Yeah, it's hard and that's decision. I think like I said earlier, like twin tracking wasn't quite for me, and it wasn't something that I did for very long. But what it did show me was the fact that I want to really excel. What it showed me was I wanted to excel in something that I didn't realise before. Beforehand, I was playing futsal and I was also playing football on the side, and I was having fun doing both. But then it wasn't until I started playing football again at a high level where I realised, you know what, I'd rather just play futsal and fully commit to it. So for me, it was a good decision to make, and I think it is hard because you've got to be twice as prepared, twice as motivated to go out and change your game and transverse. But there will become a point in your life where I think you will either favour or prefer one or the other, or you take one or the other more seriously. I think that's just natural. Whichever one it is, there's no right or wrong answer. But there's no reason why some of these skills can be transferred into either.
Yeah, class. Finally, the question that's at the bottom is: what basic key terms do you use to communicate with your teammates, or for communication?
um, So, like I said earlier, I think everything is different and everybody's different. So, you need to find certain words that your players will like to use. So, if your players like to use change or follow, switch could be you want to switch men, or sorry, change could be you want to change men, or change could be you want to change position because you want them to follow. You need to figure out what works for them. So, the easiest one to talk about is follow. Um, a lot of people use follow, but follow could mean you follow your man or you follow the ball. Get that done. Once that's done, you can then use that terminology as well. If there's a man that cuts through and no one's seen it, you could tell them to follow. Um, that's kind of the gist of the kind of principle behind it. Going into terms that I use personally, stay. So, and defenders like to, when things get a bit close to the goal, they like to run around. So imagine you're in a 2v1, um, and the ball gets played across to the second man. Ideally, in my opinion, I don't know how everyone else feels about this, but the goalkeeper then comes into play, and you create a 2v2. And it's the defender's job to stay with the man that just released the ball. And if you don't tell that defender to stay, the majority of times they will jump and they won't get there in time. And not only are they not going to get there in time, they won't stop the shot, they won't stop the pass. So essentially, they become useless in that scenario. So stay is a really big one for me. Block the middle or block the line, depending on what format, depending on what the opposition team are doing. That information, you can see the whole court. You can see everybody. If you see a pivot move from the wing to the middle, and no one's seen it, and suddenly the middle's open, the odds are they're going to try and play that pass. That's where you need to communicate to your winger. One word, name first, always the name first. After the name, the instruction. And that is really important. And this wasn't something that was brought up to me until probably I'd say about 12 months ago, really. And it wasn't until it was brought up to me and I've put it into my game, I've seen the benefit of, if you say the name first, they're engaged, their hearing's on, and then the instruction follows and they'll listen. But if you offer an instruction and then you say a name, you already lost a second. And that second could be the difference of the pass making it, the pass not. So I would say you need to talk with your defenders, you need to talk with your pivots, your wingers, and figure out what works for you. And then besides that, it's whatever the moment says. Like you might just abandon your standard stuff and go like, I'll go, and it's not great, but as long as it's clear and concise and short, you can't go far wrong. So there's three things I would say. Whatever you choose, what language you choose, make it clear, make it concise, and make it simple.
Yeah, that's great. And I think diving deeper into that question, one thing that I do want to kind of raise to sort of round this all off is the importance, or how are you finding it is affecting your tactical knowledge of the game being a goalkeeper. I'd say in football you don't really see as much goalkeepers transitioning into coaches. But in futsal we're seeing a lot more goalkeepers transition into coaches. I know Joao was a goalkeeper. There's some at the top level as well that were goalkeepers in the time. Do you think that because effectively you have to be the coach on court or the commander, especially off the ball, like you just mentioned in there with your communication with the players, do you think that's helping you enhance your tactical knowledge, your tactical game, your communication skills, and could help you more so than potentially an outfield player transition into being a coach?
Yeah, I think, Juan, what you've got there is you've got somebody that is constantly watching what others are doing. So a goalkeeper will spend most of his game watching the pivot, the winger, or the backman. Whereas a winger will spend most of his game either probably looking at his pivot or defending the ball against his opposite winger. Um, so, I mean, personally, I know coaches may hate me for this, or they may think I'm quite annoying, but I'm a man that kind of likes to ask questions. And although it's nothing to do with me, it doesn't matter if I know what system we're playing, or it doesn't matter what set pieces we have. I know personally, I take out of my own time to go out and learn our own set pieces. I learn our free kicks, our corners, our press breakers. I learn our rotation. And my reason for doing that is, like you said, because you are a leader on court. And I think you naturally pick that up anyway, and you see what's going on. So you understand what the winger's doing and why he's doing it. You understand what a backman's doing because he's right in front of you. Um, I think that's why you see coaches transfer, or goalkeepers transfer into coaches, because they've kind of had like a little sniff into every position and watching it, seeing what worked, seeing what didn't. Whereas essentially a pivot probably doesn't think about what a backman's going to do on the ball. They're going to be thinking what a backman's going to be doing off the ball because they've got to play against them, not necessarily on the ball. And I think that could be why. It's something that I've noticed as well. If I'm honest, the amount of goalkeepers that are pushing into coaching.
Yeah.
Whether they take the same line as me. I mean, Juan, I'll ask you this: were you similar to myself? Did you want to understand like the set pieces, the rotations?
I think it's like you said, you get to watch the whole game, and you kind of see the two sides of it as well. You forget that there's two teams on the court, so you're watching the as well as you're watching the other team attack your goal and the positions that they're taking up. You get to see it from a back view, and then you're watching your team attack, and you get to see that from a front view. So you get a real 360 of what the game is and what the spatial components of it are. And then, of course, I think it's then down to the individual. I'd say that's organic, and then I think it's down to the individual to learn the delicacies or the details behind the other stuff that you said you're interested in, which is our attacking kick-ins, our attacking corners, stuff like that, where the goalkeeper may not be as prominent, but you're interested to see it from an attacking perspective. But at the same time, you could be interested to see in future, if you were to come up against that free kick or that kick in, what your potential position would be as a goalkeeper. And I think that really helps grow organically the process of goalkeeper to effectively head coach rather than just a specialized goalkeeping coach. Is that you get to see that all round. And I think then, like you alluded to before, the outfield stuff and playing as an outfield player, I'm pretty sure that I'd say from the times that I've then gone on court or joined in at a session as an outfielder, for example, although limited technical ability in regards to the other players around me, the tactical awareness you'll have is of greater understanding because you'll know how to move as a player from just watching it.
Yeah, I
Um,
completely agree.
and I think it's a really really interesting topic around yeah. So it would be interesting to ask all the other goalkeepers that have transitioned into coaching, but I think we're on the same wavelength there. Yeah, and I think it makes sort of the webinar finish on a great note there. But yeah, no, I appreciate you doing this for us, Joe. I say it's really really good insight into football to futsal, everything around it, the technical, tactical, psychological, and the social aspects as well. I'm sure if anybody's got any more questions, Joe will be open to answering those over Twitter or Insta, social media. But yeah, we'll cap that off, and then tomorrow I'm lucky enough to be presenting myself, so I'll be presenting on attacking principles for anybody who's interested and around molding the space. So similar to what we were just talking about then, how we can effectively mold the space to attack different types of defensive systems. So hopefully see you back again tomorrow. But say thanks for joining. Thanks to Joe. And yeah, see you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Juan. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I appreciate it. And if you do have any questions, feel free to Instagram or Twitter or anything, really. You're more than welcome.
Class. Take care.
Brilliant. Thank you.